A 103-pound girl pulled on her father's boots and ran for the water. Two soldiers were losing their grip on an overturned boat in a harbor cold enough to kill in minutes. It was March 1869, off Lime Rock in Newport, and the air was thick with snow. The boy who had been rowing the two soldiers across was already gone. Ida Lewis had watched it happen from the window of her small stone lighthouse, and she was the only person on that rock who could go after them. To understand why a teenage girl was the last line between those men and the harbor, you have to go back to the day her family's luck ran out. Hosea Lewis was a captain in the revenue Marine, a hard, competent man who in 1854 was given charge of a new light on Lime Rock, a bare limestone ledge sitting about 200 yards off the Newport shore. In 1857, he moved his wife and 4 children out onto the rock to live. Within a few months of that move, he suffered a stroke. It took most of the use of his body, and a naval captain who had commanded ships found he could not climb his own tower. The light still had to burn. Every night the lamp had to be filled with oil at sundown and again at midnight, the wick trimmed, the carbon polished off the reflectors, the flame put out at dawn. The ships in the harbor were steering by that flame. If it went dark, someone could die for it. And the rock itself was a kind of trap. 200 yards of open water separated it from town, which meant groceries, mail, a doctor, and the younger children's schooling all had to be rowed back and forth, in every kind of weather, by whoever in the family was strong enough to pull an oar. In a hard winter the rock could be cut off entirely, a doctor 200 yards of freezing water away. That person was Ida. She was 12 or perhaps 15. The records disagree on the exact year she took it over, but she was, by common agreement, the best swimmer and the best arsewoman in Newport. So the tower became hers. The boat became hers. The 200 yards became a road she crossed several times a day, in daylight and in the dark, while her father watched from a chair he could not rise out of. Because she was always on the water, she was always the nearest help when the water turned on someone. Her first rescue came while she was still a girl. 4 young men had taken a small sailboat out, capsized it, and were floundering in the harbor. Ida rowed out and hauled them in, one after another, over the side of her boat. No newspaper wrote about it. No medal was struck. She dried off, and she went back to filling the lamp. That became the pattern, and it is the quiet, strange heart of her story. For years, Ida Lewis saved people, and almost no one outside Newport knew she existed. The rescues themselves were not gentle. Pulling a panicking, waterlogged adult into a small boat without going over yourself is genuinely dangerous work. A drowning person does not wait politely to be saved. They climb you. They swamp the boat. They will take you down with them if you let them. Ida learned to come at them a certain way, to time the reach, to keep the boat balanced under her and her weight low. She was small enough that a wrong move would have finished her, and she made those moves in the dark, in gales, in water cold enough to kill. Some of the calls were almost comic. One January morning, 3 men were driving a valuable sheep near the water's edge when the animal bolted and plunged straight in. The men leapt into a skiff to chase it, and promptly got swept out by the tide themselves. Ida saw the whole thing from her window. She rowed out, pulled the 3 men back to safety, and then, by most accounts, went back a second time and rescued the sheep too. But most of the calls were not funny at all. Each one asked her the same question, and she kept answering it the same way. Someone was in the water. She was the one who could go. Then came the 2 soldiers. On that snowy afternoon in March 1869, 3 people set out from the Newport side to reach Fort Adams' 2 soldiers and the boy rowing them across. The harbor was rough, the air was thick with snow, and the water was lethally cold. Partway across, the boat went over. Her father could not help, his body would not allow it. Her mother could not do it. So Ida, small, quick, already soaked through with spray, took her own younger brother, put the boat back in the water, and rowed straight into the storm that had just capsized someone else. She reached the soldiers. They were clinging to the overturned hull, losing their grip and their warmth by the second. She and her brother got both men out of the sea and back onto the rock alive. The boy who had been rowing them did not survive. That detail matters because Ida Lewis's story is often told as a clean run of victories, and it was not. She saved the two she could reach. The third was already lost. She lived the rest of her life having pulled some people out of that harbor, and having watched the harbor keep others. This time, though, something was different. A reporter for the New York Tribune picked up the story of the girl who had rowed into a snowstorm after 2 drowning men. And once the Tribune ran it, the rest of the country caught fire. Here is the twist at the center of her fame. To the public, this looked like the astonishing debut of an unknown heroine. It was nothing of the kind. It was not her first rescue. It was, by most counts, her 5th. She had already saved several lives before a single newspaper thought to notice. The 1869 rescue did not make Ida Lewis brave. It only made her famous. And fame, for a shy woman who lived on a rock, turned out to be its own kind of storm. That summer, an estimated 9,000 people traveled to Newport to lay eyes on her. They rowed out to the rock. They stared at her, asked for her, wanted to shake the hand that had pulled men from the sea. Harper's Weekly put her on its cover, the only lighthouse keeper ever to receive that honor. The city of Newport threw her a parade on the 4th of July and presented her with a fine new boat, named, fittingly, Rescue. The honors arrived alongside the crowds. The Life-Saving Benevolent Association of New York struck her a silver medal. The Rhode Island General Assembly passed a formal resolution recognizing her courage. In the years that followed, she would collect still more, including the American Cross of Honor, the kind of recognition that in that era almost never went to a working woman who lived alone on a ledge in a harbor. The visitors kept coming, and they were not ordinary visitors. Susan B. Anthony came. The vice president came, and in the summer of 1869, President Ulysses S. Grant himself traveled to Newport to meet her. Warned that he might get his feet wet reaching Lime Rock, Grant was said to have replied that he would get wet up to his armpits to meet Ida Lewis. In the end, he didn't have to. Ida rowed across the harbor and met him at the wharf. He told her he was happy to meet one of the heroic, noble women of the age. It is worth remembering how startling that was in her century. This was a time when a woman was rarely expected to do hard, physical, dangerous work in public, let alone be decorated for it by presidents. She was measured against Grace Darling, the young Englishwoman who in 1838 had rowed out with her own lighthouse, keep her father to save survivors of a wrecked steamship, and become a national symbol of nerve and mercy. America, it seemed, had wanted its own Grace Darling, and now it had found her on a rock in Newport Harbor. She was, at this point, still a young woman, and she wanted almost none of it. The fame did bring one ordinary human thing to her door. In 1870, Ida married a man named William Wilson. It is the one moment in her story where she seems to reach for a conventional life somewhere off the rock. It did not hold. Within about 2 years the marriage had fallen apart, and the couple separated. She kept his name on some records, Ida Wilson Lewis. But she did not keep the life. She went back to the lighthouse. The rock, it turned out, was the one thing she would not leave. By then the duty had become official as well as actual. Her father died in the early 1870s. Her mother was appointed keeper of record, and when her mother died at the end of that decade, the title passed at last to Ida herself. In 1879, she became the official keeper of Lime Rock Light, with a salary of $750 a year, which made her, on paper, the highest paid lighthouse keeper in the country. The government was, in plain terms, paying for the rescues. And the rescues did not stop just because she was now middle-aged and celebrated. In February 1881, 2 men broke through the ice near Lime Rock, and the keeper went out into the cold and pulled them from the water. For that rescue, she received the Gold Lifesaving Medal, the highest award of its kind the United States could give. And for more than a century afterward, she remained the only woman ever to hold it. She kept a plain working dory. She trusted more than the ornate gift boat. She kept the lamp filled and the reflectors clean. She kept crossing her 200 yards of water. She is credited with at least 18 confirmed rescues, and by some counts as many as 36. Because she kept no ledger of her own, the true number is simply unknown. She made her last rescue at around 63, when a friend rowing out to visit her fell overboard, and the old keeper went in after her one more time. Ida Lewis died where she had lived. In October 1911, at 69, she suffered a massive stroke. By several accounts, while she was filling the lighthouse lamp, doing at the very end the exact task she had been doing since she was a child on that rock. She died 3 days later, at the light she had tended for more than half a century. Nearly 1,500 people came to her funeral. Soldiers from Fort Adams, the fort those 2 rescued men had been rowing toward all those years before, carried her coffin, and among the pallbearers was a man named Samuel Putnam, who as a boy had been pulled out of Newport Harbor by Ida Lewis, and who now helped carry her to her grave. Her headstone calls her the Grace Darling of America, and years after her death, Rhode Island did something it had never done for any other keeper. It renamed the rock itself. Lime Rock became Ida Lewis Rock. She had spent her whole life trying not to be looked at. In the end, the state carved her name into the ground under her lighthouse. The small, hard rock she had refused, again and again, to leave. Every time the water outside her window took hold of someone who needed pulling back,